The black housekeeper was about to leave the mansion after months of humiliation, but when the millionaire boss grabbed her arm and whispered 3 words, everything began to change. The black housekeeper entered the main hall at dawn. She wore a plain uniform and low-heeled shoes. She carried a small stack of folded linens pressed tight against her ribs. The marble floor reflected her steps and the overhead lights. She moved quietly, adjusting a vase of cut flowers on a low side table near the main staircase. She checked the arrangement for loose petals, then adjusted one flower to face forward. She smoothed a linen runner on the console table along the wall. She paused to exhale, then straightened her posture. A male voice from behind startled her. "Make sure the foyer is spotless." The voice was dry and sharp. It was the father of the millionaire who owned the mansion. He stood near the far end of the hall, leaning on a carved wooden cane. He wore a dark suit and polished shoes. "Yes, sir," she said. She lowered her eyes, then moved to check the rug's alignment. She tugged it half an inch to the left. She looked up briefly. He had already turned away, ignoring her as if she did not exist beyond her tasks. She passed under the wide staircase, heading toward the dining room. She carried a dust cloth and a small bottle of cleaning spray. In the dining room, long curtains filtered early morning light. The massive table needed polishing. She uncapped the spray and worked in steady circles, rubbing away faint smudges. She felt tension in her shoulders. Tonight, the family planned a large business dinner. Everything had to be perfect. She focused on each detail, hoping no one would find fault. She heard footsteps. A junior maid peeked in. "You done in here?" the maid asked. Her tone was casual, but there was a hint of impatience. "Almost," the housekeeper said, avoiding eye contact. "Just finishing the polish." "Big night," the maid said. "Lots of important guests. Better not mess up." The housekeeper nodded. The maid left. The housekeeper inspected the glassware on a sideboard. She held a goblet to the light. It gleamed. Satisfied, she placed it down. In the corridor outside, she heard muffled voices. She recognized the father's voice again, issuing orders to someone else. She could not make out the words. She checked the seating cards stacked near the head of the table. She tapped them into a neat pile. The smell of furniture polish lingered in the air. She moved next to the sitting room adjacent to the hall. She dusted frames, adjusted pillows, and checked the curtains. She looked at the clock on the mantel. Still early. The family members were probably awake upstairs. They never rose late on a day like this. She knew the father would be pacing, checking every room, expecting total precision. She could hear subtle creaks in the floor above. She kept working. She focused on the tasks, not on the silence around her. When she finished the sitting room, she carried her cleaning supplies down a narrow hallway reserved for staff. The walls there were plain, and the floors not as polished. She opened a small closet and placed the bottle and cloth inside. She took a fresh linen napkin and returned to the main corridor. She heard footsteps on the staircase. The father's shape passed by the top landing. He did not look down. She tensed, then forced herself to breathe normally. She double-checked a console table's arrangement. Everything seemed fine. She entered a guest room to ensure it was ready. She straightened the bedspread, smoothed a wrinkle, and adjusted a lamp's shade. She glanced at her reflection in the large mirror above the dresser. Her face was calm, but her eyes were tired. She remembered her mother's voice telling her to stand tall no matter what. She touched her collar, then stepped back into the hall. Outside, she saw the millionaire's son. the one who owned this mansion. He stood in front of a large mirror, struggling with his tie. He wore a crisp shirt and polished shoes. He seemed frustrated. His fingers fumbled with the knot. He did not notice her at first. She approached slowly, unsure if she should offer help. His reflection caught hers. He turned around. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Could you help me for a second?" She hesitated. Normally, she would not interfere unless asked. But he had asked. "Yes, sir," she said. She stepped closer and raised her hands to the tie. She kept her movements efficient and light. The silk felt smooth between her fingers. She fixed the knot, centering it on his collar. Their eyes met in the mirror's reflection. He watched her hands, then looked at her face. She noticed a slight change in his expression, as if he saw her for the first time. "Thanks," he said, clearing his throat. "You're welcome, sir," she replied. She stepped back, folding her hands in front of her. He nodded, then stepped away without another word. She remained where she was, her heartbeat steady but a bit faster than before. She wondered if he would say something else. But he did not. He disappeared around the corner, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She returned to the main hall and checked the flowers again. She noticed one petal had fallen onto the marble floor. She picked it up and carried it away. She heard distant murmurs from the kitchen staff. Pots and pans rattled. The aroma of simmering stock drifted through open doors. Everything was in motion. The father would expect absolute perfection tonight. She went to the powder room near the main entrance. She wiped the sink, then polished the faucet. She saw her reflection in the metal, distorted but present. She felt the tension in her chest. She knew her place here, invisible service. Still, the moment with the millionaire lingered in her mind. He had looked at her, and not just at her uniform or her hands. She had seen curiosity in his eyes. She shook the thought away. She had work to do. As she stepped back into the hall, the father approached again. This time, he spoke quietly but firmly. "Check the seating arrangements again," he said. "I do not want any confusion later." "Yes, sir," she said. She returned to the dining room and picked up the seating cards. She counted them, arranged them, and placed each one at its assigned spot. She stepped back and scanned the table from one end to the other. The father entered, stood at the far side, and examined the room. "Everything looks fine," he said, not looking at her face. She nodded silently. He left. She walked back into the hall. A maid passed by, whispering to another staff member about the expected guests. The words drifted around the housekeeper. She tuned them out. She went to the foyer and knelt down, checking the edge of a rug, making sure it lay flat. Standing up, she dusted off her knees. She smoothed her apron and looked around. The morning light had shifted slightly. Time moved on. She tried not to think about tonight, focusing instead on the present moment. She passed a large mirror on the wall. Before, she might have hurried by. Now, she paused. She remembered the quiet moment helping the millionaire with his tie. She remembered his eyes. She wondered if it meant anything. She decided it did not matter. She had responsibilities. She began walking toward the next room to ensure that the silverware was set correctly. She felt watched, but no one was there. She shook off the feeling and continued doing her job. The mansion remained quiet, except for distant footsteps and the hushed voices of staff. Each movement she made was small and careful. She knew she had to maintain that standard all day and well into the evening. She walked into a small storage room near the kitchen to pick up a clean tablecloth. The kitchen staff worked in a steady rhythm. Pots clanged, and knives tapped against cutting boards. She avoided their eyes. She took the folded cloth and moved toward the dining room again. The hallway outside was quiet. She placed the cloth on a sideboard and began to smooth it out, checking for creases. A maid approached. "He wants everything double-checked," the maid said, sounding annoyed. "Says the arrangement's still off." "I'll look again," the housekeeper said. She returned to the table, eyeing the positions of chairs and plates. She adjusted a water glass a fraction of an inch. She did the same with a napkin. Her fingertips pressed the fabric firmly. The father appeared at the doorway. He stood with one hand on the frame, looking directly at her. "You said it was correct," he said, not raising his voice, but making the tension clear. "I'll ensure it, sir," she said. She moved around the table, checking each place setting. She made small adjustments, even if they weren't truly needed. He watched in silence. She could feel his stare on the back of her neck. After a moment, he stepped closer. "Make sure the silverware shines," he said. She nodded. She picked up a fork and rubbed it with a dry cloth until its surface reflected the overhead light. He remained nearby, arms folded, waiting. When she finished, he leaned in, inspected the fork, then left without a word. She stepped into the corridor and took a slow breath. She thought about her mother's words. Keep calm. Work hard. She remembered how her mother used to say that nothing in life came easy. She nodded to herself, determined to hold steady. From the kitchen, a junior maid whispered to another. "Did you see him glaring at her?" The other whispered back. "She'd better not cross him." They fell silent when the housekeeper passed by. She pretended not to notice. She moved toward the sitting room again. The mansion was large, but she knew every corner. She adjusted a lamp, wiped a smudge off a small end table, and stepped back. The evening loomed ahead. Important guests would arrive soon. She imagined the front doors swinging open and people stepping in, expecting flawless hospitality. She would blend into the background as always. A quiet shuffle of footsteps in the hall made her turn. The young millionaire, her employer, passed by, glancing in. He offered a small nod, almost imperceptible. She nodded back, keeping her face neutral. He continued on his way, straightening his jacket sleeve. She wondered if he remembered how she helped him with his tie earlier. Probably just a passing moment, she thought. She arranged a stack of magazines on a coffee table, lining them up neatly. Back in the corridor, one of the maids carried a tray of wine glasses. She bumped into the housekeeper's shoulder lightly. "Careful," she snapped. The housekeeper stepped aside, not responding. The maid gave her a suspicious look. "Don't think you're special," she whispered. "He just needed help with his tie. Don't get any ideas." The housekeeper said nothing. She returned to the dining room to recheck the seating cards. The father was there, speaking quietly with another staff member. When the housekeeper entered, they stopped talking. The father eyed her. "If anything goes wrong tonight," he said, "there will be consequences." "I understand, sir," she said. "Good," he said, and left, his shoes tapping firmly on the floor. She stood alone by the long table, pressing her thumb against the edge of a napkin. She felt her pulse quicken. She could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Everyone seemed on edge. She walked to the hallway and found the main foyer. The large front doors were closed. Outside, light filtered through the glass panels. She straightened the flower arrangement again. She checked the runner on the console table. She made sure no dust had settled on the mirror frame. From behind her, the millionaire approached softly. "Everything set for tonight?" he asked, voice low. "Yes, sir," she said, keeping her tone even. He took a breath and glanced at the arrangement. "Good," he said, pausing as if he wanted to say more. After a moment, he walked away. She moved toward a small alcove near the staircase and peeked inside. A hidden cabinet held extra napkins and candles. She verified the stock. Outside, a maid passed again, this time carrying a large platter. The kitchen staff's voices were louder now, probably preparing final details. The father's voice cut through sometimes, giving orders, checking details. The housekeeper listened but did not react. She knew her job well. She did not want to give anyone a reason to complain. The hours moved forward. Afternoon light shifted in the windows. She polished a brass doorknob, making it shine. She inspected the foyer's marble floor one more time, wiping away a tiny scuff mark with a damp cloth. Her knees felt slightly sore from bending and kneeling, but she did not stop. She heard low voices drifting down the hall, other staff talking about the expected guests. She caught fragments: a prominent businessman, a potential deal, high stakes for the family. In the corridor, she crossed paths with the father again. He paused, studying her face without a hint of warmth. "Did you check the guest room upstairs?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Earlier this morning," she said. "Check it again," he said, then continued walking. She nodded and climbed the stairs. She reached the guest room and entered quietly. The bed was neatly made. The curtains were even. The lamp on the nightstand stood straight. She ran a finger along the dresser. No dust. Everything seemed perfect. She left and closed the door behind her. On the way down the stairs, she heard two maids whispering on the landing. One said, "She's always so quiet." The other responded, "She won't last long if she gets on his bad side." They stepped aside as she passed. She gave no reaction. She reached the bottom step and walked toward the foyer again. The millionaire stood near the entrance now, speaking to someone on the phone. His voice was calm, but he sounded serious. The father's footsteps echoed from a distant hallway. The staff moved in and out of rooms, finalizing preparations. The housekeeper adjusted the hem of her apron. She felt as if she were caught in the middle of a storm about to break, but her face stayed neutral. She took a moment to stand by a side door, out of direct sight. She flexed her fingers and inhaled deeply, then exhaled. Tonight would be a challenge. She knew that. She had no illusions. Still, she had a job to do, and she would do it well. She pushed away any personal thoughts and focused on the next steps, checking the silverware once more, verifying the position of the place cards, ensuring the hall remained spotless. She returned to the dining room and ran her eyes over the settings. Each plate, glass, and utensil looked perfectly aligned. She tapped a napkin edge, then stepped back. The quiet room offered no comfort. It smelled faintly of polish and fresh linen. Through the doorway, she caught a glimpse of the father pacing by, checking the clock on the wall. Time pressed forward. From down the corridor, she heard a brief exchange of words between the millionaire and another staff member. She could not catch what was said, only the low murmur of their voices. She wondered if he would speak to her again before the guests arrived. Probably not, she thought. He had other matters to attend to. She reached up to adjust a light fixture's chain, ensuring it hung straight. The day continued. She made small adjustments, always careful, always quiet. No one asked her opinion. No one needed her personal thoughts. They only needed her steady work. She accepted that. As the final hours before the dinner approached, she stood near the foyer, hands folded, ready for whatever came next. She stood near the foyer, hands clasped, watching staff members rush from room to room. She checked her uniform, smoothing the apron. Everything had to be perfect now. Guests would arrive soon, and there was no room for error. She wondered if she needed to adjust anything else in the hallway. The rugs looked fine. The tables had fresh flowers and neat linens. A junior maid passed by carrying a small tray of polished silver forks. The junior maid paused, glancing at the housekeeper. "They've been whispering," the maid said in a low voice. "They think you've been acting strange." "I've done nothing wrong," the housekeeper said, keeping her voice steady. The maid shrugged and hurried off, disappearing into the dining room. The father's footsteps echoed down the corridor. He approached the foyer and stopped next to the housekeeper. He wore a stern expression. "Check the side entrance," he said. "I want no dust or debris there. Important guests might step inside that way." "Yes, sir," she replied. She walked to the side entrance, a narrow door that led to a small patio. She inspected the floor for any dirt. She noticed a slight scuff on the threshold. She took a cloth and wiped it away. She adjusted the doormat, pressing it flat. She stepped back inside, closing the door quietly. She returned to the foyer. The father had not moved. He studied her face. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm doing my work, sir," she said. He said nothing and walked off toward the main hallway. She watched him go, feeling a tightness in her chest. She could sense his suspicion, though he had no reason to blame her for anything yet. From the dining room, she heard faint voices. Two maids discussed the seating chart again. One of them mentioned her name, then stopped when the housekeeper entered the room. They pretended to focus on their tasks. She checked the table settings once more, making sure every name card faced the right way. She ran her finger along a crystal glass, ensuring no smudge remained. The young millionaire stepped in. He looked at the table, then at her. "How does it look to you?" he asked quietly. "Everything seems in order, sir," she said. He nodded, then leaned in slightly. "If you see anything off, let me know. We can't have any mistakes tonight." She nodded, keeping her face neutral. He seemed calmer than his father, more at ease. She noticed he avoided speaking too loudly. Perhaps he did not want others to overhear. He left the room, and the father entered shortly after. The father scanned the table. "The guests will be here soon," the father said. "You will not linger in their presence. Understand?" "Yes, sir," she said. She knew her place. She would remain in the background, serving quietly, and then fade away as if she were invisible. A maid approached carrying extra napkins. She handed them to the housekeeper. "Place these near the sideboard," the maid said, trying to sound authoritative. The housekeeper took them and arranged them neatly on a small tray at the side of the room. She felt the maid's eyes on her back, judging. She excused herself and stepped into the hallway. She felt the tension growing. The staff seemed on edge, and the father's constant supervision weighed on them all. She headed toward a small closet near the stairs to pick up a feather duster. On the way, she heard a low murmur of voices around the corner. "Think she's getting ideas," someone whispered. "Don't know, but the old man's not happy," another replied. She tightened her grip on the doorknob and opened the closet. She took the duster and returned to the foyer. She dusted the top of a high shelf, stretching on her toes. The action kept her mind focused. A kitchen hand stepped into the foyer, wiping sweat from his forehead. He carried a tray of small appetizers covered by a linen cloth. He lowered his voice, looking at her. "Careful tonight," he said. "People are on the lookout. They say you got too close to the boss." She frowned slightly. "I did nothing wrong," she said. He shrugged and left quickly. She finished dusting, then moved toward a tall mirror at the end of the corridor. She polished the edges, wiping any smears. Her reflection looked calm but tense. She heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw the millionaire again, this time alone. "Did my father say something to you?" he asked quietly. "He wants everything perfect, sir," she said. "That's all." The millionaire looked down the hall, as if checking who might be listening. "Listen, if anything bothers you, just let me know," he said. She nodded. "Thank you, sir, but I'm fine." He left, glancing over his shoulder once, then disappeared around a corner. She stepped back into the dining room. The atmosphere felt heavy. The other staff members seemed to keep their distance from her. She approached a junior maid who was adjusting a centerpiece. "Need help with that?" the housekeeper asked. "No," the maid said curtly. She turned away, focusing on her own task. The father reappeared in the doorway, checking his watch. "Guests will arrive soon," he said. "Stand by the foyer. Open the door when they knock. Greet them politely and guide them inside." "Yes, sir," she said, leaving immediately for the foyer. At the foyer, she placed herself by the door. She straightened her apron and smoothed her hair. Through the glass, she could see the sun beginning to set. The day had felt long. Behind her, staff rushed in and out, carrying small items and adjusting final details. The father's footsteps approached once more, and she kept her posture straight. He stopped behind her. She could sense him studying her. "You will remain professional," he said in a low voice. "No unnecessary conversation. Do not draw attention to yourself." "I understand, sir," she said, keeping her voice even. "Good," he said, stepping away. His tone hinted at suspicion, but he had no concrete reason to accuse her of anything yet. She waited, listening. The voices in the mansion seemed to quiet down as the moment approached. The staff settled into positions. The father stood at a distance, arms crossed, watching every detail. A maid entered the foyer, then left, carrying a small tray of extra utensils. The kitchen hand passed by with a final platter of hors d'oeuvres, heading to a side room to keep them fresh. Everything was in place. She looked at the front doors, prepared to open them at the first sound of a car pulling up outside. She knew her role well. She would greet, step aside, and remain invisible. She felt the tension in her stomach, but she kept her face calm. She focused on her breathing. The mansion was quiet now, each person in position. Any moment, guests would arrive. She braced herself, hoping no one would blame her for anything. She could hear a faint hum from the kitchen. The father stepped out of sight. The millionaire was nowhere to be seen. She stood alone by the door, ready. Guests began arriving in the evening. The housekeeper stood by the front doors, opening them as each visitor approached. She smiled politely, spoke a few words of greeting, and stepped aside. The guests moved into the foyer and then followed the staff toward the dining room. She recognized a few faces from previous events. They ignored her as usual. The father hovered nearby, watching the guests pass through. He seemed calm, but his eyes followed the housekeeper's every move. She knew he wanted no incidents. She focused on her simple task. After the final guest arrived, she closed the doors and checked that the foyer remained tidy. Inside the dining room, conversation flowed. Men in suits and women in elegant dresses spoke in low tones. The housekeeper moved around the perimeter, refilling a glass here and there, adjusting a napkin. She kept her head down. She noticed a few guests glance her way, but no one addressed her. The father stood at the head of the table with the millionaire, making polite remarks to his guests. The millionaire caught the housekeeper's eye once. He lifted an empty water glass slightly, and she stepped forward to refill it. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded and retreated. The father seemed to notice. He leaned toward his son, whispering something. The housekeeper could not hear the words, but the father's face looked displeased. She stepped back into the hallway. A junior maid passed by with a tray of appetizers. "They say you're getting too friendly," the maid said quietly. "Be careful." "I'm just doing my job," the housekeeper said. The maid shrugged. "Don't let them think otherwise." She hurried off toward the kitchen. The housekeeper returned to the dining room and lingered near a side door. She watched the guests talk and laugh. The father raised a toast. She carefully approached an end of the table to pick up a used napkin. She moved silently, not interfering with anyone's conversation. As she slipped back, she overheard a guest ask the father about the staff's efficiency. The father nodded, assuring the guest that discipline was a priority. Later, as the main course arrived, the housekeeper noticed the father's gaze shift in her direction again. She avoided his eyes, focusing on the work. She adjusted a plate at the far corner of the table. She heard faint whispers from another maid in the corridor, mentioning her name and the word attention. She tried to ignore it. When the opportunity arose, she stepped outside the dining room to the corridor. There, the father confronted her. He approached without warning, standing too close. "You will keep your distance," he said in a low voice. "I see you trying to catch his eye." "I'm not trying anything, sir," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Good," he said, "because if I see any sign of you overstepping, you'll regret it." She nodded once, not daring to argue. The father walked away, leaving her alone. She noticed one of the other maids watching from the far end of the hall, smirking slightly. The maid disappeared before the housekeeper could say anything. The housekeeper returned to the dining room, serving coffee and clearing small plates. She moved slowly and carefully, speaking only when necessary. The millionaire glanced at her again when she refilled his coffee cup. He lowered his voice. "Everything all right?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." He looked like he wanted to ask more, but the father tapped a spoon on his glass, drawing everyone's attention. The housekeeper stepped back. As dessert was served, the atmosphere grew heavier. The staff seemed to watch her more closely. The father remained at the head of the table, occasionally scanning the room. She felt as if every move she made was under scrutiny. She delivered a small dish of cream to a guest and returned to her spot by the sideboard. A junior footman nudged her elbow. "Rumors are spreading," he whispered, looking nervous. "They say you caught the boss's attention. Don't let it blow up." She clenched her jaw. "I haven't done anything." He shrugged. "Tell that to them." He stepped away quickly, carrying a plate of pastries to the far side of the table. She knew leaving now would be impossible. She needed this job. She had no other prospects. The mansion was her livelihood. She told herself to stay calm. She would keep her head down and do her work. She would give no reason for them to doubt her professionalism, but the tension grew with each passing minute. When the guests began to stand and move toward the sitting room for after-dinner drinks, The housekeeper stepped aside to let them pass. The father caught her eye and gave a brief nod as if warning her. The millionaire followed the guests out, pausing briefly near her. "Be careful," he murmured. It sounded like a genuine concern. She didn't reply. He walked on, joining his father and the visitors. She went into the dining room and began clearing the table. Another maid joined her, but remained silent. The maid didn't meet her eyes. Outside, the low hum of voices drifted down the hallway. She stacked plates, wiped the table, and folded linens. She carried items back and forth, her footsteps soft on the floor. By the time the dining room was empty and reset, the guests were settling into the sitting room. The housekeeper heard laughter and calm conversation. She straightened her uniform. She needed to remain invisible. She would not give anyone cause to suspect her of any misbehavior. She glanced at the doorway and saw a maid whispering to a footman. They stopped when they noticed her. She inhaled slowly and picked up a tray of clean glasses, heading toward the pantry. She would stay busy and keep quiet. That was her only strategy now. She carried the tray of clean glasses through a narrow corridor behind the dining room. The corridor was dimly lit, the walls plain. She preferred it that way. It felt safer, away from staring eyes. She placed the tray on a small side table and turned to get more items from the kitchen. As she stepped back into the corridor, the father appeared at the far end, walking toward her at a slow, deliberate pace. He stopped a few feet away. "I warned you already," he said, voice low. "I have done nothing wrong," she said, keeping her tone even. He moved closer. She could smell his cologne. "Stay away from my son," he said quietly. "I won't repeat myself." She swallowed. "I'm only doing my job, sir." He narrowed his eyes. "If I find any sign that you're encouraging his interest, if I sense any trouble, I will make sure you never work in a place like this again. You understand?" Her heart pounded. She nodded. "I understand." He stepped back and crossed his arms. "You think you have options outside these walls," he said, voice calm but threatening. "You think anyone will hire you if I spread the word that you cause disruptions. Word travels fast." She kept her gaze steady. "I depend on this job. I don't want problems." "Good," he said. "Then do as I say. Keep your head down. If you consider leaving, remember that I can make your life difficult out there too." He turned and walked away without waiting for her response. She remained in the corridor for a moment. She flexed her fingers. They felt cold. She knew he could keep his promise. He had influence. People like him could ruin her reputation with a few words. She needed stability, income, and a roof over her head. Without this job, she risked too much. A junior maid passed by, carrying empty wine bottles. She glanced at the housekeeper, then looked away quickly. The staff seemed to know something was happening. They didn't need details. They saw the tension, the father's watchful eye, the sudden distance between the housekeeper and everyone else. She returned to the pantry, placing the clean glasses on a shelf. She took a fresh cloth and started polishing a set of silver spoons. Her hands moved mechanically. She tried not to think about the father's threat, yet it pressed on her mind. She had few options. She could stay and accept the silent humiliation. Or she could leave and risk unemployment. Maybe worse. A maid entered, took a pile of napkins, and left without a word. The silence in the pantry weighed heavily. She finished polishing the spoons and brought them to the dining room. The guests were still in the sitting room, chatting in low voices. From a distance, She heard murmurs of conversation and occasional laughter. She placed the spoons in a drawer and closed it gently. She considered leaving the room, but a footman entered behind her. He eyed her suspiciously. She ignored him and adjusted a stack of plates on a sideboard. He snorted softly and left. The mansion felt like a maze of whispers. Every corridor seemed to hold someone with a suspicious gaze. The housekeeper moved quietly, avoiding the main areas. She checked the upstairs guest room again, running her palm over the dresser to ensure there was no dust. She fluffed a pillow. The silence in the empty room brought a small relief. Here, no one watched, but she knew she couldn't stay hidden. Back downstairs, in a narrow hall near the kitchen, she overheard two maids talking. "I heard the father threatened her," one said. "Serves her right, getting involved above her station," the other replied. They giggled softly and walked away. The housekeeper stepped out after they were gone. She felt her throat tighten, but she said nothing. She would not show them weakness. In the kitchen, cooks worked steadily, cleaning up after the meal. She passed through without stopping, heading toward the side entrance. She opened the door slightly and looked outside. It was dark now. The air was cool and still. She considered the possibility of leaving this place forever. But where would she go? She had no savings to risk a long period without work. She had no one who could help her start over elsewhere. The father's threat echoed in her mind. She closed the door and returned inside. The mansion's interior felt warmer, but stifling. She straightened her apron and made her way toward the sitting room. She peeked in, seeing guests seated on plush chairs, holding glasses of brandy or wine. The father stood near the window, talking to a well-dressed man. The millionaire sat in a corner, nodding politely to a guest. She entered quietly and began to pick up empty cups from a side table. As she worked, one of the guests, a middle-aged woman, said, "Could I have some water?" "Of course," the housekeeper said. She poured water into a glass and handed it over. The woman nodded thanks and turned back to her conversation. The father watched her. She could feel his eyes. She kept her face blank. She collected a few more cups and left, heading down the hallway to the pantry. She rinsed them and placed them on a drying rack. A footman passed, gave her a curious look, and continued on. She took a breath. Her heart beat faster than normal. The night was not over yet. The guests would linger. She would need to keep serving, keep proving her worth as a silent, efficient worker. She could not show that she felt cornered. She thought about the young millionaire's concern. He had tried to warn her. But his father had made the rules clear. She wondered if the millionaire would do anything to help. He seemed kind, but maybe he couldn't oppose his father's will. She wiped her hands on a cloth and returned to her station near the sitting room's entry. Standing there, she listened to the low hum of voices. The staff moved in and out, refilling drinks, clearing small plates. She stood by the door, waiting for someone to signal her. No one asked her to speak. She was just part of the backdrop. From time to time, she caught fragments of staff whispers drifting from nearby rooms. They talked about her situation as if she weren't there. They enjoyed the drama. She ignored them, staying focused on her duties. Time passed slowly. She brought fresh water when requested, cleared empty glasses, and avoided eye contact with the father. He seemed pleased that she was behaving. She hoped he would leave her alone now. She knew better than to trust that. Though, the threat hung over her head like a sharp blade. She clenched her jaw and kept working. After all, what else could she do? She cleared the last of the empty glasses from the sitting room and took them to the pantry. The guests had begun to leave. Their coats and hats were collected by other staff at the front hall. She did not linger to watch them go. She focused on cleaning the few items left behind. Her hands moved steadily, washing, drying, and placing glasses on shelves. When finished, she wiped the counter and stepped out into a quiet corridor. The hallway lamps were dim now, most of the visitors gone. She walked slowly toward her small bedroom in the service area. As she passed through a back corridor, she heard low voices in the distance. She could not make out words, but she guessed they were talking about her again. The tension in the household had grown thicker. She knew that the father's warning would reach everyone's ears. They would treat her with caution or contempt. She expected no kindness. Before she reached her room, the father intercepted her. He stood near the end of the corridor, arms folded. "Don't forget what we discussed," he said. "I have contacts everywhere. You leave this house under bad terms, and your name will be worthless." "I understand, sir," she said, keeping her tone calm. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. There was no point. He held the power, and both of them knew it. He stared at her for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing her to continue on her way. She passed him without looking at his face. She kept her posture straight, her steps measured. When she reached her room, she closed the door and leaned against it. She listened for footsteps in the hall. None came. She sat on the edge of her small bed, hands folded in her lap. The room was cramped and plain. A small lamp on a simple table provided a weak light. She removed her apron and folded it neatly. She set it down and rubbed her face with her hands. She thought about her options. Leaving meant searching for work elsewhere, but his threats would follow her. Staying meant constant pressure and humiliation. She could not imagine enduring this in silence forever. She pulled back the blanket and sat under it, shoes still on. She stared at the wall. She was tired. She wanted to sleep, but her mind would not rest. She wondered what the millionaire would say if he knew the extent of his father's threats. But what good would that do? The father had influence. The staff would side with him or remain silent. No one would believe her easily. Or if they did, would they stand up to him? A faint shuffle outside made her sit upright. Someone passed by her door, then continued down the hall. She breathed quietly, trying not to make a sound. In the silence, her heart beat heavily. She needed to make a choice. She could try to endure without complaint, hoping nothing got worse. But the idea of living in fear of the father's wrath and the staff's whispers felt impossible. She thought about talking to the millionaire. He had shown concern a few times. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he could protect her. But that would risk the father's anger. If the father discovered she spoke to his son about this, he would ruin her for sure. Yet, what other option did she have? Waiting and doing nothing would lead nowhere. It would only give others more time to spread rumors and corner her. She slipped off her shoes and placed them neatly by the bed. She decided that staying silent would only make things worse. Sooner or later, she would break under the tension. If she left without a fight, she would face hardship outside. If she fought back, at least she might gain some respect or a real chance elsewhere. The thought made her stomach churn, but at least it gave her a plan. Tomorrow, she would find a moment to speak with the millionaire in private. She would explain what was happening. She would be honest about the threats and the rumors. She had nothing to lose now. If he sided with his father, she would leave. no matter the consequences. If he believed her, maybe he could help. She tried not to get her hopes up. She kept it simple in her mind. Say the truth. Accept the outcome. She lay down on the bed, pulling the blanket over her. The lamp's glow made the room seem smaller. She felt the day's exhaustion in her bones. Her eyes were heavy, but sleep would not come easily. She thought of her mother's advice to keep dignity. She knew what dignity felt like. It meant standing up when no one expected it. She closed her eyes and tried to relax her shoulders. Voices drifted faintly from somewhere in the house, probably other staff wrapping up tasks. She heard a cupboard door close softly. She listened to the silence between muffled sounds. She steadied her breathing. She had made a decision. It scared her, but it felt better than staying trapped without action. She ran through her plan once more. In the morning, she would keep calm and watch for an opportunity. The millionaire often appeared in the hallway or the study. She would approach him directly, speak plainly, and state the facts. She would say she could not continue under these conditions. She would not beg, but she would make him understand that she deserved better than threats and rumors. If he dismissed her, so be it. At least she would leave with her head high. If he supported her, she might escape the father's control. She felt her heart settle slightly. The uncertainty remained, but she was no longer frozen. She turned off the lamp and lay in the darkness. The sheets smelled clean. She focused on the quiet hum of the house at night. She tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring a confrontation. She would not run anymore. The next morning, she woke early. She dressed in her uniform and left her small room quietly. The corridors were silent. Some staff were already at work, but no one spoke to her. She checked the dining room quickly, adjusting a chair, and then walked to the hallway near the study. She knew the millionaire often spent time there after breakfast. She waited a few minutes, polishing a brass doorknob, pretending to be busy. She heard footsteps. The millionaire approached, wearing a neat shirt and dark trousers. He passed her at first, but stopped when he saw her standing there. "Good morning," he said, keeping his voice low. "Sir, may I speak with you?" she asked, looking him in the eye for the first time. He hesitated. "All right, but not here." He glanced around. "Let's step into the study." They entered the study. It was quiet. A window let in morning light. The millionaire stood behind a small desk, arms crossed, waiting. She took a breath. "Sir, I need to explain something," she said, voice steady. "There have been rumors among the staff. They say I'm trying to gain your attention. I'm not. I've done nothing but my job. Yet, your father has threatened me. He said, if I don't keep my distance, he'll ruin my reputation. He'll make sure I never find another job." The millionaire frowned. "He said that?" "Yes," she said firmly. "He warned me that if I talked to you about this, I'd regret it. But I can't continue under these conditions. I'm being watched, judged, and isolated. I'm afraid to lose my job, or worse." He tapped his fingers on the desk. "I had no idea it went this far." He lowered his voice. "Why come to me?" "You're the only one who can stop this," she said. "I have no power here. I can't quit easily. I have no savings. But I won't live in fear. If you don't believe me, I'll leave anyway. I can't stay silent while he tries to control my life." He looked at her closely. Before he could respond, the door opened. The father entered, scowling. "What's going on?" the father demanded. "Why are you here? talking alone." The millionaire turned to face his father. "We're discussing something important. Please leave us for a moment." "I won't leave," the father said. He glared at the housekeeper. "Did you dare speak behind my back?" "She told me about your threats," the millionaire said. "Is that true?" The father narrowed his eyes. "She twists words. I'm protecting you from a schemer." The housekeeper stood her ground. "I've done nothing but work hard. You threatened me if I didn't keep quiet." The father stepped closer. "You should have stayed silent. You're risking your future." The millionaire raised a hand. "Stop. Let me handle this." A tense silence followed. The father stared at his son, then at her. "She's lying," the father said finally. The millionaire shook his head. "I believe her." He looked at the housekeeper. "You wouldn't risk your job if this wasn't true. I know you're honest." The father's face twisted with anger. "You don't understand how this works. We can't have her stepping out of line." "She did nothing wrong," the millionaire said quietly. "I saw how hard she works. I saw how you treat her." "Enough." The father turned to her, eyes cold. "You will regret this." The millionaire stepped between them. "No, she won't. I won't allow it." The housekeeper clenched her hands. Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice calm. "I won't be intimidated anymore. If I must leave, I will. But I won't stay silent or be treated like an object." The millionaire nodded. "You're not leaving. I value your work. If my father or anyone else tries to harm your reputation, I will put a stop to it. You deserve respect." The father opened his mouth, then closed it, furious. He walked out of the study, slamming the door. The noise echoed through the quiet house. The housekeeper and the millionaire stood face to face in the stillness. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have known something was wrong. I didn't realize he would threaten you." She exhaled slowly. "Thank you for listening," she said. "I was afraid you wouldn't believe me." "I do believe you," he said, "and I will fix this. We'll find a way to ensure you have the freedom and respect you deserve." She nodded, feeling the tension leaving her shoulders. She had spoken the truth, and now the next steps were in his hands. She did not know what would happen next, but she knew she was no longer alone. "Thank you," she said, voice steady. He gave a small nod. "We'll talk more soon. For now, just know you're safe." She stepped out of the study, her head held high. No more hiding. She had done what she needed to do, and he had responded with understanding. The house felt different now. Not perfect, but different. She moved down the corridor, ready for whatever came next. She spent the next few hours working quietly. The staff watched her from a distance, uncertain what had happened in the study. The father's anger was fresh in everyone's mind. She continued her tasks, polishing a sideboard, aligning a row of utensils, wiping a small mark from a window. No one spoke to her. She didn't mind. She preferred silence over whispers. In the late afternoon, the millionaire found her in the dining room. He approached, hands in his pockets, checking to see if anyone else was listening. "I spoke with my father," he said quietly. "He won't bother you again. I made it clear that I won't tolerate threats." She nodded. "Thank you, sir." He looked at the polished table. "Listen, I don't want you trapped here with no future. You deserve better. I can help you find opportunities outside this house. You could study or get a position where people treat you well." She hesitated. "I appreciate that. I never thought I'd have a choice." Before he could reply, footsteps approached. The father stood in the doorway, glaring. He said nothing, but his presence was enough. The millionaire stepped closer to her. "We're done with this, Father," the millionaire said firmly. "You will not interfere with her life again." The father's jaw tightened. He glanced between them. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Your threats are over," the millionaire said. "If you try to spread rumors about her, I'll make sure everyone knows the truth." The father scoffed and left, shaking his head. The housekeeper's hands trembled slightly, but she hid it by adjusting a napkin on the table. "Don't worry," the millionaire said softly. "He won't risk facing me on this again." She lowered her voice. "I'm grateful, sir." "I didn't know if you would stand by me." He nodded. "I'm sorry it took so long." He studied her face. "I want to ensure your future is secure. I can provide resources for training, help you find a better position, or even stay here in a role with proper respect and fair treatment." She considered his words. "I never imagined leaving or improving my situation," she said. "I always assumed I had to accept whatever came my way." "Not anymore," he said. "You deserve respect and a chance to grow." Voices drifted from the hallway. The staff moved about, but none dared approach. She could sense they were curious but fearful. She looked at the millionaire, meeting his eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what else to say." "You don't need to say much," he said, lowering his voice. "I meant what I said. You're not just a worker here. You're a person I value. I care about what happens to you." She felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with relief. "I've never heard anyone speak to me like that," she said. "I don't know how to respond." He took a step closer, keeping his voice calm. "You don't have to respond with words. Just know you're safe, and I'll do what I can to help you move forward." They stood there quietly. Beyond the doorway, the afternoon light shifted. She realized how tense she'd been all this time. Now, she could breathe. He reached out slowly, resting a hand gently on her arm. She didn't pull away. His touch was light, respectful. "If at any point you want to leave this place," he said, "I'll provide references and help you find a better job. If you choose to stay, I'll ensure you have proper status here. No more whispers, no more threats." She nodded. "I never thought I'd have such a choice," she said. "Thank you." They paused. She noticed he was looking at her differently now, not as a boss or a patron, but as a man who cared about her future. She didn't fully understand where this would lead, but she felt safer than before. Outside the room, footsteps passed again. The staff probably wondered what they were discussing. She didn't care. She placed her hand lightly over his, acknowledging his support. He gave a small nod, meeting her eyes. They said nothing more. Words felt unnecessary. As she turned to straighten a row of glasses, he stepped closer. "Before I go, I want you to know one more thing," he said quietly. "I'm not just protecting you out of duty. I'm doing it because I have feelings for you." She looked at him, surprised but calm. She appreciated his honesty. She felt warmth in her face, a gentle rush of understanding. "I won't let anyone treat you like you're invisible," he said. "Not now, not ever." He leaned in, pressing his lips softly against hers, a brief, careful kiss. She didn't resist. It felt honest, simple. Then he pulled back and waited, watching her expression. She didn't speak, but her eyes showed she understood. They stood like that for a moment, aware that everything had changed. He left quietly, blending back into the corridors of the mansion. She remained behind, her hand resting on the table, heart steady. She knew the path ahead would not be simple, but for now, she had a sense of security and a feeling of being seen and respected. It was enough to carry her forward. Early the next morning, she moved through the halls with steady steps. She wiped a shelf, straightened a chair, and checked a mirror's surface. The staff kept their distance, unsure how to treat her now. They had heard something changed. The father's threats were no longer a secret. His power over her had faded. She carried fresh linens to a guest room. On the way, the father appeared in the corridor, blocking her path. He looked tense, but did not speak immediately. She waited, holding the folded sheets against her chest. "You should have kept quiet," he said finally, voice low. "You forced my son's hand." She stood firm. "I only told the truth." He narrowed his eyes. "You could leave this place. You don't belong here." She did not flinch. "Your son said I can stay or go. He said he'll support my future either way. Your threats mean nothing now." The father clenched his jaw, then stepped aside. He spoke no more. She walked past him without fear. She headed upstairs, placed the linens in the closet, and returned downstairs. Each step felt lighter. In the kitchen, a maid approached her, voice uncertain. "Is it true he can't touch you now?" The housekeeper nodded. "He won't dare." The boss made it clear. The maid looked away. "I'm sorry for not helping you," she said quietly. "I was afraid." "Don't worry," the housekeeper said, and moved on. She did not hold grudges. She understood fear, but now she had support from someone with real influence. Later, the millionaire found her near the back staircase. He carried a small folder under his arm. "Good morning," he said. "I made some calls. I found a training program in hospitality management. It would give you a chance to build a better career." He offered her the folder. "If you want to leave this mansion, I can help arrange your enrollment. If you prefer to stay, we can redefine your role here, give you better pay and conditions." She opened the folder and saw details of a reputable training course. She looked up at him. "Thank you," she said. "I would like to try something new. I appreciate the help." He nodded. "I'll provide references and cover the initial costs. You deserve a fair start." She closed the folder. "I never thought I'd have such an option." He reached out, touching her hand lightly. "You do now. If anyone tries to harm your reputation, they'll have to face me. You're not alone." She felt a calm confidence. She had a path forward, and no longer feared the father's threats. She could leave behind the isolation and humiliation. She had a future where her skills mattered and where respect was possible. Around midday, as she passed through the foyer, the father stood in silence, watching her. He said nothing. She did not slow down. He could stare all he wanted. It no longer mattered. The staff no longer whispered behind her back. They moved aside, letting her pass without interference. She spent the afternoon finishing small tasks. She collected her few belongings from her cramped room. She folded her uniforms neatly. She would leave soon, once the arrangements were set. The millionaire said he would handle all details, and she trusted him now. Before evening fell, she met the millionaire outside the study. He gave her a letter of recommendation, signed and sealed. "This will help you secure good work after you complete the training," he said. "Use it anywhere you choose." She accepted the letter. "I'm grateful," she said. "I never imagined ending up with such support." He nodded, leaning in slightly. He lowered his voice. "I wish things had started differently, but I'm glad you stood up for yourself. I'm glad you came to me." He paused. "If you ever need more help, just send word. I meant what I said. I care about you." She looked at him, understanding the weight of his words. "Thank you," she said, voice steady. "I won't forget this." They said nothing more. No need. She would leave the mansion soon, but not in disgrace. She would walk out with her dignity intact, with a plan, and with the knowledge that someone respected her. She finished her last tasks quietly, returned the cleaning supplies to the pantry, and stepped into the corridor one final time as an employee of this house. Outside, the evening air felt cool. She carried a small bag with her personal items. She looked back at the mansion's facade. She remembered the fear and silence that once trapped her. Now she had options. She had broken free from the cycle of intimidation. The door opened behind her. It was the millionaire. He did not say anything, just met her eyes and nodded encouragement. She nodded back, then walked away, heading toward a future she never thought possible. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.